Hi everyone, I'm Harv, Ian Harvey, founder of Collective Intelligence, and this is Stuff That Matters Now. So welcome back, guys. I am in downtown Greytown. Is there such a thing?
Yeah, we've got a CBD. Look at it. It's hustling.
It is. We've got a traffic jam. We've got trucks.
Two tractors.
Okay. And today I am interviewing Sian Paterson, founder of the Blue School, which is going to be our focus today. And Sian, thank you for taking the time to see me today. And I've been wanting to get here for a wee while and interview, so thank you.
Oh, welcome. Pleasure.
And I was just having a chat to Sian before this session just to frame up how we're going to do this. And I'm really interested in, Sian, of diving into your journey first as to how you got to this Blue School idea. And I'm really interested in your journey to that. And Sian was one of our first scholarship recipients within Collective Intelligence, has gone on from that. Sian, just tell us quickly, where are you from? Are you from here?
I am, yep. So born and bred in Greytown in the South Wairarapa. I moved overseas and was living overseas for a long time and came back, I was about 23, I think it was. But during that time overseas, it was when I was flitting back and forth at uni, started my child development degree, and my background's in child development psychology. Took a break from that halfway through, and because I was thinking, okay, I've got this, but how am I going to apply this? Where am I going to make the biggest impact of this knowledge? Which is what I'm passionate about. So I went overseas for a while, visited some schools, and just got really inspired by different education systems around the world. There's some really shit ones, and that also inspired me, but there's also some incredible theories out there and amazing curriculums and philosophies that I thought, you know what, we've got an opportunity back home to set up a school that really champions a few of these concepts.
So did you finish your degree before you went over there?
No, halfway through. And then came back, finished my degree. I wasn't a qualified teacher when I started Blue School, so that was my other thing. I finished university with my child development in psychology, and was going down two paths. It was either going to be crime and law, or it was going to be education. And through lots of reflection, lots of talking, lots of research with people within both, organisations and sectors, they said, you can make the most impact. You either ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, working in the crime and justice, or you go education and try and stop the ambulance from getting there. So that was where. That's how it happened. Yeah.
Right. And was the motivation always there to get into this field of some sort? I
think so. Yeah. I mean, I don't even remember in growing up thinking I am from a family of educators, but I didn't ever think, okay, I'm going to be a teacher one day. It was just more huge passion for understanding how the brain learns. That's one of my biggest. I'm not smart enough to be a neurologist, so that was just. I really wanted to look at that. That was a huge driver for me. I want to understand how we learn and combine the science of how we learn with what we learn. Not just be a teacher that drives the curriculum. I want to understand the whole child, the brain development behind them, and then tailor education around that. So that was kind of my inspiration around that. Yeah.
Cool. So that's clear. What did you see overseas, and where did you see it?
I spent a bit of time in the States, so I went around a few of and had meetings in some of the what you'd call high-end schools in Manhattan, New York, and down in the southern states. That was one country that I kind of left and went, far out. That's it's inspiring, but I went, they've got a lot of work to do, just in terms of what they prioritise and what they value within education, and especially when you go into New York, where it's a heavily privatised education system, and they've got schools that are set up literally for children, to turn children out to work on Wall Street. It's that. I mean, there is elements to it that were great, but there was also parts of me that just went far out. the child as a child is not being recognised,
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to educate this kid for the system.
For the economy. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We need to get them out. We need to get them producing and giving back. So that was really it. And you can see, the impact that was having on children and also the inequalities around it. It's one of the most inequitable education systems, I think, in the world, is what they've got in the US.
Yeah, we're spotting a few problems here at the moment.
Yeah.
Sian, so how old were you when you were cruising around the States, knocking on doors?
19 and then 21. Yeah.
Why does somebody let a 19 or 21-year-old woman into the school?
Why do they let it? I mean, the accent's a big one. You can sell anything on a Kiwi accent. It was more just me saying, hey, I'm really interested in what your country's doing. I'm really interested in what your school's doing. Can I come and have a look? I'm really inspired by it. Let me come and pick your brains on a few things. And I think equally they were really excited to hear what we were doing. So it was that sharing of knowledge. And there was a lot of parts, talking to a lot of teachers over there, there's a lot of things that they're enviable about what we do here. And that was one thing I really reflected on going overseas and looking at education systems, is we are given an enormous amount of flexibility. I think we're led to believe we're not, and that it's very constrained.
Yep.
But, New Zealand education system is pretty world class. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good to hear. So, and how long would you stay in each school?
Oh, it would usually just be a day or two. I did a whole day of observing teachers within the classroom, looking at practice, and then I'd attend a meeting, things like that, and then I'd touch base with principals and things like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what about through Europe? Did you see anything through there that spun your wheels?
So, like Reggio Emilia philosophy, which Blue School is very inspired by, which is project-based learning, which is children work on projects over a series of a term or 2 terms, and that's inspired by the children's questioning. So the teacher's job is to provocate and to pull out the questions of the child or the interests of the child and provocate the learning around that. So, a question about why the sky is blue can lead into a whole 2-term project around space and astrology and all those kind of things. So there's a whole lot that comes out of it, but it's the teacher's job to provocate and to extend. So that's what Blue School's also inspired by. So that was a lot of the European philosophies around that.
Did you see a common thread coming through the top schools that you saw?
A common thread with
what they were doing and their philosophies and
relationships sat at the heart of it. So that was a big thing with those schools overseas, where that the teacher understood their role, his role in the child's learning as being all about having a relationship with the child. It wasn't about a curriculum directive.
right.
Yeah. So communication and relationships, that's were the 2 key things.
Right. That's quite different than what I went through.
Yeah,
Right. It's
yeah,
just like
absolutely.
the relationship with the teachers. Like, what?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like,
Yeah.
learn this shit,
Yeah,
spit
and get it out. Yeah.
Learn this shit, get out of here.
Yeah.
So, Sian, was there a moment you thought, right, I'm on my way back to New Zealand? Was there a general plan to come back here by a certain time?
No, there wasn't. I mean, I never thought I'd end up back in Greytown doing what I'm doing. You grow up here thinking, God, you look around at the young people and you go, yes, sad sacks. Like, why would you end up back here? But then you realise, actually, this is an amazing place. It's Greytown, and the Wairarapa is a hugely, growing community with just such high calibre people that you think, God, I'm so lucky to be here and to have a business and a school that is part of it, But no, it was just more, I say to everyone, it was more just a perfect storm of opportunities. It was me coming back, finishing my degree, going, we've got an opportunity here. I'm really inspired by this education system. I'm inspired by this type of learning. The building came up for sale. It was a great purchase, pulled some guarantors together and away we went.
So how do you finance that?
Family finance, and also we had another investor at the same time. Yeah.
Right.
So
why did they back you?
Because I think for me, I say things with conviction, even if I don't, believe them at the beginning. I'm going, we can make a difference here, and I think they knew that I had invested the time to really understand what the difference, what we could offer, and what would be different, and I think that was part of it, and also just socioeconomic factors. This community was growing. There was a real need for this type of care and education. So there was a whole lot of other figures around that too.
Okay. I love the conviction thing, right? So
I'll start with conviction, yeah.
so it's like, I've got an idea, listen up.
Just run with it, yeah.
And, because, I mean, you're not talking about peanuts.
No, God, no.
Yeah, it's a big...
It's been a huge investment, yeah. And, as I've said to you, it's been... first 4 years with no salary. It's that kind of investment. You just don't take anything. You just keep it going. And
so then, frame up for me the Blues School. What is it?
So we're a school for children aged 3 to 6 years. So just to clarify, people often go, well, why do you go to 6? Or that's a really strange age group. So in New Zealand, you don't actually need to start primary school until age 6, but it's very ingrained in our New Zealand culture that you start day 5, on the day of your 5th birthday, and whether it's a Wednesday or a Tuesday or whenever.
I tried to get my second one on as a 4-year-old.
Yeah, there you go. And for us, we look at going back to the science, going back to key parts of development that happen between that age group. That's where I feel like we could make the biggest difference. So that's what our school focuses on 3 to 6.
And that's science-based?
Science-based, yeah. It's all. I mean, that's the key area. That's the key window of, I call it brain plasticity, for social competence, for inquiry, for independence, self-management. All of those key whole child elements happen in that time.
So 3 years of age. So they could start when they turn 3.
They start when they turn 3, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are they like as a 3-year-old? Just because I've forgotten, right? No, seriously, I'm interested because I go, take a 3-year-old. What do you do with them?
So we have different programs. So we've got our inquiry project-based program, which are for our 5 and 6-year-olds. So it's at new entrant primary school age, and then our 3 to 4-year-olds. It's all about social competence. It's all about trying to get them to recognise themselves within others, that they have a place within a group setting. It's getting their oral language developed. So our teachers are down at their eye level. With every conversation, our teachers are down at eye level. It's about self-management, so it's getting them to understand their body, how to take care of themselves, and then by age 4, they're into that inquiry-based part of their brain. So they're out of that, immediate needs, and now they're into, my brain's free for learning now. I can take up.
So I'm smiling like crazy across at Sian because you're talking about that, and then they hit 4. I'm going, oh shit, they've done that at 3.
Oh yeah. Do it at 3, yeah, and it's a key. It's a really, really key stage. We often get kids, that they've had some time in the home, or they've gone into, daycare settings really young, and they come to us, and their brain is just not free for learning. That's what we talk about all the time: is that their brain is not ready for anything other than attachment, anything other than basic needs being met, and. To just go on a side tangent, we were seeing a trend in that about 3 or 4 years ago, that we were getting these groups of children come through without that basic level of attachment being met, and that insecurity, that security just wasn't there, that sense of security. So we had to sort of readjust our teaching priorities and go, and we also connected the community. We held about 3 parent evenings that year, getting a paediatrician in, getting a clinical psychologist in, getting an attachment theorist in, to talk to the parents about what this actually looks like. Through no fault. It's never about putting fault or blame on parents. It's just about education, and it's going.
So these are kids with 1, 2-year-olds or whatever coming through.
Yeah,
right.
Who haven't had that first 1,000 days really.
Tell me about the first 1,000 days.
First 1,000 days, every bit of research, we know it now. It's the most important in our lifetime. That birth to, or even the epigenetics are going further actually before birth. Yes. But that first 1,000 days, we cannot underestimate, and we should not underestimate the importance of that. And what I mean by that is attachment, secure, having a secure base, a child being within that first year, knowing that if I cry when I'm hungry, I'm going to be fed. Because if we don't meet that basic need within the first year of life, their brain is going to be wired to be in fight or flight mode. And it's very hard to get to rewire a brain after the first 1,000 days. We get windows of it. There's lots of research out now that's saying, age 12 to, I think, 15, there's a window there of neuroplasticity that comes through. But, if we just, as a society, would recognise and understand that first 1,000 days is absolutely key. We can tell by age 3 who's going to end up in the criminal justice system and who's not.
Fuck, that's scary, isn't it? And sad, because I was just thinking about that inequality thing that yesterday I had the responsibility of taking my grandson out for my first solo 45 minutes pushing the pram while his mother Gabby got a haircut, and it was. And look, he after 45 minutes, went cruised around and whatever, and after 45 minutes came back and he was hungry, and he got a feed.
Yeah.
It was. What am I trying to say? The thing is, Gabby could rely on me, the grandfather, to come in. Can I have a haircut, have a break for a while, love to do it, right? And that stuff's really important, to be able to access that family and all that.
Absolutely, the support system. Yep.
And I don't have a bond with this kid yet, but it will develop over time. And because, yesterday was just an old man pushing him around in a
buggy.
But, that basic thing. So you, at 3 years of age, you've got an idea.
Yeah, we've got an idea. Within the first, they come to us at 3. We can usually gauge within the first 6-7 weeks what this year is going to look like in terms of teaching, and what our relationship with the parents is going to need to be. So we can work that out within the first year, and then all from that. We talk about. I don't know if you follow Nathan Wallace, but he uses a great phrase as the teachers of early learning, so under 6, under 8, we are the architects of the brain. Every other sector from that, so primary and secondary, are just polishing what's there. So we see that within the first, they come to us at age 3, we've got usually have a lot of work to do around just basic needs and things like that, and then at age 4, it's all about just polishing that off with identifying their interest, championing their interest, responding to them, getting them to ask questions, follow through with research, apply that research, all those kind of things. Okay,
so we've identified one thing as in that first stage, feed them when they cry. What else?
Feed them when they cry. Affection and love. So that looks like face-to-face contact. That also is physical contact as well. There's lots of theories out there that have said, you let the baby cry, you allow them to self-regulate, to self-soothe. It's a load of bullshit. A child under 3, under 1, needs physical contact. So when they cry, you hold them, and then they recognise that they have a secure base, that their basic needs are going to be met by that one person.
Right. Yeah. Another human is actually going to comfort them.
They're going to care. Yeah.
When they're on the shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yep. What else?
So we've got love, we've got communication. So we need to, we've seen a decline in that with technology. iPhone's been put in front of children. Children's oral language, comprehension, vocabulary is all developed through the face-to-face interaction a child is getting from their secure base, so their primary caregiver, their mum or their dad, whoever's at home the most. So that is another key. We get children come through at age 3 who need further oral language development. So that's a key area of teaching that we would focus on for the first 6 months of the child being with us. But that's a huge part that parents need to be and down at their level. So understanding that down at their level to communicate to them, to model words, we have one of the pieces of research that is always referred to in with children developing oral language at under 3 is when you put them in high chairs and you sit across from them. When your mum had this spoon and pretend to be the plane and go into the mouth. So that is hugely rewarding, and it stimulates part of the brain for the child with a whole lot of basic needs, but one of them is communication, so that the child is understanding, the sound of a plane and going into the mouth. What we're seeing is with the rise of things like suckies and things like that, where an item is put in front of a child for them to just independently hold and suck on, we're seeing low communication develop out of that, so poor vocabulary develop out of that. We're seeing poor muscles develop out of the mouth, and because they're not taught to hold a spoon, they're not the muscles within the mouth are not developing because they're not using cutlery and things like that. So that's just when we talk about those parenting aspects, that all happens under 3, and it's all to do with that interaction between the primary caregiver and the child. We find that the pressures to work now, I mean, it's great that we've just had the extension in paid parental leave, because the longer that we can keep that primary caregiver in the home within the first 1,000 days is the most beneficial. That's what we need to be working on and making sure that does happen. I think it's over in Sweden or Norway, they have a year's parental leave. And
so you see that as an investment, not a cost?
No, it's an investment across all other sectors that you can imagine. It's an investment.
Because, if you saw it on, it comes up on the news that, they're looking to increase this, whatever, and people are going, oh, shit, that's just a cost. It's a cost. Yeah, because, just keeping kids out of jail, I saw the figures in the UK, it's £40,000 a year to send a kid to Eton. It's £230,000 to send a kid to jail.
Exactly.
Just send them to Eton.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Yeah. It's a value we place. I think that's the other thing is we have pushback within this country with things like paid parental leave, because I don't think we value the role of the parent within the home as well. We are very much workforce orientated.
And you hear people say, "Look, I'm just a mother."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the issue. And that's, you look at our early childhood teachers; they're the most undervalued teaching sector.
Yes.
And yet, their work, primary and secondary, cannot do the work unless cannot teach unless we've done the work in the early childhood sector. And they're the most undervalued, underpaid sector of them all.
And Kate and I used to, we don't now because we're not consistent enough, but we used to do this breakfast in schools once a week in a DSL 1 school.
Great, yeah.
And it was always like beforehand, oh God, it was just like an inconvenience.
Yep.
And you'd walk out of the school going, that was such a buzz. And you'd spend about an hour and a quarter with a group of between 30 to 45, depending on who came. Mm-hmm. And, Sian, you'd know this, but watching kids coming in eating sugar at 7:45 in the morning, food colouring all through their mouth, some of them were spinning out already, with, and the teachers would say the breakfast made so much difference, not just to those 30 to 40 kids, but the rest of the school, because those kids would settle down and they weren't hungry and they weren't trying to steal other people's food.
Exactly. I know. Yeah.
And it was just, and we stopped doing it. We did it for about 3 or 4 years. We stopped doing it because we just were not reliable enough because of work and so forth. But it was phenomenally rewarding, also really humbling to see these kids from the DSL 1 schools, what they, it was just a whole different gig. And
the need for it, I think it's humbling, and it's also it's a stark reminder that we've got a long way to go within our communities, And
the research would say their intelligence is no different than a kid at a DSL 10 school. It's just that they haven't had the basic needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then the argument is, well, we hear it all the time, it's the parent's responsibility. Well, actually, no. It's a child, and their brain needs to be free for learning, and if it means that the hunger pain is taken away, then give them breakfast.
Yeah, look, that's a nice thing to say. But it's this, in my mind, it's society's responsibility because a lot of the stuff has created the problems. Anyway, we're off topic. So, Sian, coming back to so do they stay with you until they're they are 7, or do they stay to you until they hit 6?
So, over 5 is what we do. We don't put an age on it. We just allow them to stay up until 6. And it took us, when we first started Blue School, we still had, so children would come at age 3, and then they would typically still leave at age when they turned 5. And that was generally because we hadn't started the education process with our parents and with our community. And about 2 years ago, we put a pilot program together that started cohort transitioning. So that was, instead of children transitioning to school on their day of their 5th birthday, they transitioned to school with their mates. So that was our job at our end at Blue School, was to form that group. So look at the children who were starting age group, starting school time. We would then group them. We would then do a transition program for those school leaders, usually take about a term, and then we'd have groups going out at the beginning of each term to their feeder primary schools. That was based on research that we'd done, and the ministry had brought out research to say around looking at transitions within this child's education journey from 3 to 18, and saying that the transition into primary school was one of the most important transitions within their school journey, and that it needed to be done right. And one of the critical success factors of that was peer influence and peer relationships. So that child was transitioning into school with camaraderie, with a sense of connection, with a group, and they also felt that there was a perceived group on the other side. So as in their new class. So that was the research we put together, and we formed a program around that. And we started a cohort program here at Greytown School and found it enormously successful. And that's all we do now, is cohort transitioning.
And so how many kids do you cater for at Blue School?
So our class, so we're licensed for our space. We're licensed for 85 children. For our program philosophy and what we value, our class is 30. So we have 30 children.
Right. And how is that financed?
Ministry of Education, primarily, through funding of Ministry of Education, and also parent fees.
Right.
Yeah.
And are the fees prohibitive for lower decile people to come to the school?
No, not at all. No, we do a scholarship program anyway, but in the sense, fees don't bring us in money. It doesn't. Yeah, it's just it might buy us a few extra resources, but it doesn't. Primarily, our funding is Ministry of Education.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the primary school that, because I'm guessing a place like Greytown or Wairarapa, there would be 2 or 3 schools that would take your kids, or is it more than that?
We've got 4. Yeah.
4 schools.
Yeah.
And what's the feedback from those schools?
Around cohort transitioning?
Yeah.
No, hugely positive, as in that's what we do now. So that was a program that we did 2 years ago, and we got feedback from the parents, feedback from the transitioning schools, all found that the children entered school with an exceeded level of confidence, security, and just that sense of that. Typically what we'd find with children who transition at age 5 is that they go through a lull because it's establishing a new normal, and they're still rebuilding peer relationships. Now, peer relationships for anyone under 8 is incredibly hard and time consuming, and so when you spend 5 years developing that from birth to 5, you're building all those social competence skills, you're getting them to negotiate, they're learning how to negotiate, they're learning how to exit groups, play, all those kind of things. To then say, right, now kid, you're on your own, you're going into a new environment, you have to start rebuilding that all over again. And for primary new entrant teachers, that's an enormous investment for them to have to do, and plus they're governed by a whole other curriculum that have a whole bunch of other priorities. So that was their feedback, was that sense of they came in and they had those relationships, they had those people to lean on, for support. So when things got a bit tough and actually, oh my goodness, we're now free in this huge playground now at lunchtime, what do? They had each other to pull on, and that was an enormous, positive.
And Sian, what's the feedback from the schools themselves, from the primary schools or the parents? What are they noticing about the kids going through? Because you would have kids now going to secondary school that you've...
entering into secondary school, now, yeah.
So do you follow that journey or interest in that journey beyond Blue School?
Only because all of our families, we've still got I've got strong relationships with, so if they're still here, we talk, and I'm quite connected to the children. But I think the feedback from, and I haven't done this, is just my general opinion, but the feedback from those parents who I have talked to about it is that their primary years have been successful and happy ones. And I think that's been because, and that those connections that they entered school with are still there, they're still strong. They may not be as, they're around at each other's houses every day, but there's a bond there because the bond wasn't broken, yeah.
And what's your point of difference? What's the thing that you do differently than everybody else in this age group?
It's really interesting because I was at a professional development about a year ago in Wellington, and this teacher came up to me and she said, "Oh, are you from Blue School?" I said, "Yeah, I'm from Blue School." She goes, "Oh, you're the people that deal with all the behaviours." And I went, "What?" And I thought that was really interesting. She said, "Yeah, I hear that you guys nail the behaviours of children." And I didn't get to inquire too much further, but I think it was this idea that we get children that require something extra. They're often round pegs and square holes or something like that. And not all of them, but there's a few. And for us, and for my team of teachers, we champion personalised learning. We have weekly meetings, our team, where we sit down and we go through all of our 30 children and we talk about what's on top for them and what's not going well. And we share all of our insights, and we develop. One of the things I champion within my leadership is consistency. If we agree upon a strategy for a child, we all follow through with that. There's not a variation in its delivery, and I think that's where we do find we've had children that have been challenging and the behaviours have been challenging, but we have been able to send them off into the next sector in a really good space. I think that's what they would say to us, like what's different for us. For me, it's our inquiry and project-based approach, and also our personalised teaching around it. So, we've got a highly skilled team of teachers, and they all work hard and personalise their teaching to each individual child.
The project thing really interests me because you can, I'm thinking that from a kid point of view. I used to get lost at school. School wasn't great for me at any stage. But, I remember often going, what the fuck are we doing now? It was like, what's this?
The next topic? Yeah.
What's this?
Yeah.
Or go, where did this come from? What did I miss?
Yeah.
And then you just sit there and go, oh, shit, I'm. I remember that from a really early age going, everybody else knows what's going on, but I don't.
Yeah.
And just shutting down. So the whole project thing. And the other thing that's going on in my mind, why is the sky blue? But we could, we can get to that later.
Yeah.
So, Sian, what... so this is a model that could be replicated around New Zealand?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And we are seeing it. I think the idea that we hear about, we hear about modern learning environments. We hear about collaborative learning environments. We hear all this, these terms, the stuff, yeah. One of the things that we hear, particularly in the primary sector, is they say we have inquiry learning, but they teach inquiry. No, I shouldn't say they teach. It's still inquiry is considered a subject, where it shouldn't be.
Right.
So inquiry is a way. It's a way of teaching. It's a practice, So at Blue, our whole teaching is inquiry-based teaching. So, and the children work on projects through inquiry. And does that make sense? So we developed our philosophy, so project-based learning at Blue School. Our philosophy champions collaboration, communication, creativity, and confidence. So when a child leaves us through project-based and inquiry-based learning, they should leave with those 4 skills. That's what we that's what we prioritise for our children. What are the 4 again? Collaboration, communication, creativity, and confidence. And those were the 4 skills that we found that through they talk about the 21st century learning. those skills every human being needs within a workforce, within a home. Those are the four skills, wherever, within every environment. We can lay the base for all of those skills by the time they leave us. So that's what we want. We're not interested in whether they can read and write. We want them to have those we call them the 4 Cs.
So it's interesting. About a few months ago, I interviewed a guy, Ian McDougall, who had done some qualitative research, and I interviewed him on the podcast, and he'd interviewed 30 Gen Z people coming through who are destined to go on to leadership roles, and he wanted to find out what the key 8 soft skills were needed, drawing out of them. And he didn't intend to get 8, but he ended up with 8. But there were 2 that stood out above everything else. Number 1 for modern leadership was the ability to form long-term trusted relationships. Number 1. And the other one was judgment. Learning from mistakes and situations and being able to store that away and bring it up in other places. And Ian sort of wrapped that up also with intuition, that, and you can't teach intuition, but you can put people into environments where they learn and they store and they can, the more experience you have,
absolutely,
the greater the intuition.
Yeah.
But I thought that was fascinating.
It is really fascinating,
And so I'm not sure how old Gen Z, I get all mixed up with Gen Z, but they're young. He said it was fascinating to see those were the 2 that came through most of all. And I really reflect on that building long-term trusted relationships, and I think of those 4 Cs. And if you had those, is that going to enable you to form long-term trusted relationships? They
absolutely.
Do.
That's what you need.
It meshes in together. And reading and writing is great, but if you can't be trusted and so forth, then who gives a shit?
Exactly.
So, Sian, going forward, what's the plan with the Blue School going forward? What do you want to see?
It's interesting. I mean, we had 3 years ago we were approached to franchise, and this was at a time where Christchurch was looking like a great place during the rebuild, and a great place to start a second. And but I have just reflected on my own practice as a teacher, as a Blue School teacher, and what we do at Blue School and what we do so well. And I just feel that without I just don't like the idea of it being continuously replicated, because I don't think it can be, to be honest. It's
really,
in terms of the project-based, inquiry-based, absolutely can, but Blue School itself as a school with its character and what we are able to offer our community, I just don't think. I just think it's special enough as it is. So the idea of franchising and rolling it out throughout New Zealand is steered away from.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true, Sian? Do you think that's true? Because I'm sitting there and going,
I've definitely been pushed back on that, and they've said no.
Yeah, because the big convincer you are, you're not convincing me on that. Because I'm sitting, it'd be interesting to hear from listeners when this goes out and going, no, this needs to be rolled out.
And I agree. I'd love to see it rolled out, because my fundamental belief is this is the way education should be for our young people. Come on, say it. My heart and my head goes, finding people. It's finding people.
Okay.
I've got an amazing team, and I've had an amazing team for. The consistency for our team has just been unreal, and we've had the same team for 4 years, and we'll have for the future. But the idea of finding Blue School teachers who get it, who really get it on a fundamental level of practice and reflection, and the investment it takes, I think it's huge. Unique. It's huge. Yeah.
So tell me about how many in your team?
So we have 8 teachers. Yeah.
And what's so good about them?
What's so good about them? As people, they're inquirers themselves. They learn and relearn constantly. They are passionate about the success of that child standing in front of them, not so much about, they don't have another agenda for it, it's about that child standing in front of them. And they're great communicators, and they across all areas of their lives. If I think about the individual teachers as they are people, they have amazing relationships within their own life and within their own bubbles, and I think that's a huge reflection on what they can do as teachers.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And so you've found those, have they come into the area to work here, or are they here already?
Mixture of both. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Some come overseas and things like that. So.
Yeah. And what's so good about you?
Oh, what's so good about me? As a teacher, I think for me, I'm always wanting to. I strive with quality. I want to be the Blue Sky. I want it to deliver the best education and care it can possibly deliver. So my standards are kind of unrelenting with that and consistent. I think that, that was the Ministry of Education gave me when we had our review 3 years ago, and they said that was one thing that they could see permanent throughout the whole school, was that there was consistency with standards, and I think that's really important for me. So that's what's so good about me, is that I champion that. I think that's really important.
That's what you do. So a different question: what's your superpower? Apart from tricking people to invest in things.
Yeah, tricking people. I think relationships for me. I thrive off connecting people. I really thrive off that. That's something I feel really passionate about. Is I meet, and I feel really privileged. The role that I'm in is that I meet so many amazing parents and families, and they often move to the region, or they're new from Wellington or Europe and the UK, and I love the idea of going, you don't know anyone, who can I connect? And I'm constantly thinking about people to how I can connect them up.
That's your thing.
Yeah.
That's your thing.
Yeah.
And Sian, because of our relationship, I know this has been really tough for you at times, personally.
Yeah, it has been. Yeah.
Yep. And have you, I was going to ask, have you ever thought about giving up, but you wouldn't have thought about giving up.
Oh, no, I definitely thought about giving up.
Have you?
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely, you do get to a point where the children keep you in it. Like, there's not a question about that. The children and the families are the ones that get you out of bed in the morning. And the team is there. The team supports the whole operation, but it's definitely, the demands of the job are massive. The investment is massive, and it requires such a whole investment of you emotionally. Every fibre of your being has to be given. And I've learnt, it's when, say you've said to me it's been really tough. It has been really tough, but I've also now learnt about my own well-being and how I can manage it, and that balance we talk about. I didn't understand what balance was when I first started at Blue School. It was me, it was an all or nothing, ride or die. It was that kind of mentality, and that's what I expected out of my team as well. So,
I remember that stage.
Yeah, and it was, and when you start to expect that, you look back and go, I expected that out of everyone around me. You can understand why you had a really high staff turnover in the first year.
It's like, don't go and work.
It was working for this woman, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, look, I do remember that stage, and I mean, I was going to say you were a monster. That's not quite the right word, but you were so focused.
Oh, yeah.
On this thing, and it was, I could imagine that you would have just burnt people out.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I'm really intrigued in the pushback on the franchising thing, and franchising is, is, you can think of McDonald's and things like that and so forth, and cookie cutter. But what you're saying, there is an essence about the Blue School that needs to be captured for it to grow. Who do you, looking around New Zealand, who do you see and you go, that's fabulous work in the education space at any level?
There's amazing, schools, and I'd say at the primary sector, who are doing incredible things when it comes to, who are doing a lot of what we're doing in the sense of they're prioritising relationships, they're championing inquiry, they are really understanding the partnership that needs to happen with parents and children, and that, we talk about that triangle with the child at the top and the teacher and the parent on either side. There's some incredible schools out there that are doing that. And early childhood sector, we have a curriculum that is world renowned. The Te Whāriki curriculum is one of the most renowned curriculums there are overseas. So, and that's because it's the first bicultural curriculum, and that's our document, and the whole heart of it puts the child at its statement is the child is at the heart of the matter. So that the child is centre to it, and it's this idea that family and community relationships, well-being, holistic development are all prioritised within teaching.
And who developed that curriculum?
Ministry of Education. There's two. I'm going to put me on the spot. I can't remember the authors now, but it was in New Zealand Development.
Right.
Yeah.
And how long has it been in for?
Since the 80s.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that you would consider that world class. That's something.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. We have people come over from overseas to study our curriculum for early childhood.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because, Sian, we often, good news doesn't get sold.
Oh, I know, yeah.
And so it's lovely to hear that, because when you're not in the sector, all you hear are when teachers are disgruntled or something hasn't worked. Right, that makes the news.
Yeah.
Right, not hey, this is going really well.
No, exactly. And also, for early childhood, it's what do those teachers do? Those teachers work within a curriculum that is outstanding. It really is.
Yeah.
So
and it's interesting because my mother was a teacher, and she was phenomenally passionate. She was old school, obviously, but just something burnt inside her to teach kids. And my father used to go down to this is primary school, and he used to go down at lunchtime to have lunch with her, and she'd be in the staff room with kids reading and so forth, and the old man would be there as well and listening to reading and so forth. It was just
so good.
And he just loved doing it. Now this farmer would go down and sit in the staff room with one. The other thing with my mother, she was notoriously late, and it was a two-teacher school, and the principal said, I just ring the bell when Mrs. Harvey turns up, because it's somewhere around 9 o'clock.
Oh God, it's so funny.
There was no point ringing at 9, because sometimes she wasn't there. So somewhere around when she turned up, so sometimes I started early, sometimes
so good.
Classic, eh?
It's so good.
But the interesting thing, the passion that burnt inside her to teach was quite something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing, isn't it?
It's a real thing, yeah. Teacher burnout is a real thing.
Yeah.
And it can happen quickly. It can happen without you really... burnout manifests in different ways, and I think it's one of those things you've got to be critically aware of as within yourself, what those signs are,
And what makes a good teacher?
What makes a good teacher? For me, through the eyes of working with teachers, is a teacher is someone who can authentically position themselves within a learner space. So what I mean by that is that they enter into an interaction in a space where they are wanting to learn and also inquire, as well as give what they have to give as well.
So it comes back to that relationship.
It comes back to relationship,
right.
Yeah.
So it's not hierarchical, you actually enter into a space and going, right.
Yeah.
And is that at any level?
I think so. I mean, I can't speak for... I don't have enough experience or knowledge within, secondary, but I think, we as teachers, we're trained, we should be positioning ourselves... We know this term called ako. It's a Māori term that we strive to do in teaching, which is basically the learner and the teacher role is switched within an interaction,
right.
And we're constantly striving as Pākehā teachers to authentically practice that. It's difficult because it's not part of our culture. With Māori it is, and it's hugely inspiring when you see authentic alcohol practice happening. But that to me is such a key and such a value of good teaching, is that they can enter into any space, any interaction, regardless of what information or teaching needs to happen. They can also feed off the learner as well and position themselves learning from the child. Yeah.
This is off topic. I don't care. This next piece is off topic. How do you think this teaching New Zealand history is going to go down in schools?
Teaspoon of vinegar, to be honest, but it needs to happen. It really, really needs to happen. Yeah.
And who is going to decide what is taught?
Well, that's the issue, isn't it?
Right, because history is a viewpoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm fascinated with this subject, and I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be one of the biggest social changes in New Zealand is kids learning our history. And they go, and what history are they going to learn? And what viewpoint?
Well, it's only since you look what's happening in the US, and we're now starting to hear it's that whole you don't know what you don't know. And now you're starting to read and hear about what American children are taught in terms of the American history and how flat out wrong it is. It's not even factual. And you think, okay, shit. And then you look at what we were taught in schools. And I think, for me, I remember being taught very little about New Zealand history. If anything, to be honest. And so it's now that question of exactly that. What history are we putting together for that? Absolutely. Yeah,
it's going to be fascinating.
It's going to be really fascinating, yeah.
And then you've got teachers are going to have to deliver that.
Yeah.
And, teachers have always been at the front line. And I had some wonderful pushback last year on social media beginning of this year, from farmers talking about their kids coming back from school and being taught this environmental bullshit from these fucking lefty teachers and so forth, right? And I said, well, but I remember my older sister in this is going back, about 1968, coming back, she was in the sixth form, and saying to my father that DDT wasn't a good thing to use on farms because it got onto the food chain. And that didn't go down well.
No.
Bloody lefty teachers again. What's this? And, that was a big explosion. I remember that stuck in my brain. And I remember this DDT thing going, and she said, yeah, it gets in the food chain. And he's just going, what would they know?
Oh, my God.
So I think of this, I think of this New Zealand history being taught as going, wow, this is really interesting ground.
And just, I think I'm currently doing. I was having a conversation with a friend the other night about it. Actually, he's a farmer, in he now works in Wellington, but he grew up here, and we were both having the conversation because I'm currently doing my master's, and I've just finished a paper in in applied social work.
Yep.
So it's an offset.
In your spare time.
In my spare time. So and it's still linked with Blue School. We'll continue with that. But it's I just finished this paper on Māori development and social services, and I finished it last year, just going, that paper needs to be a prerequisite for every university entrant person going in, because the understanding of Māori development as people and as a culture, pre-colonisation, through colonisation, and now we're into decolonisation. What does decolonisation look like?
I've never heard that term before.
Oh, haven't you?
Decolonisation.
Okay. So what does it look like? Yeah, so it's this idea of how are Māori making their way through society now with the intergenerational trauma that's been happening. So how is it manifesting now? What does it look like? And I think that was such a key learning for me with working with children and working with Māori families and looking at the inequalities and looking at why are they represented. Imagine being part of a culture where your people are represented on every negative statistic. What that must feel like, and
every day. Sian, this you mentioned epigenetics earlier on, and then you just mentioned intergenerational trauma, which I think is a new term now that's been used before on the podcast. I didn't know it was a thing until the last few years.
Neither.
And I didn't know that the DNA in somebody could change because of trauma caused from one generation to the next. I think is it 3 or more generations can hold on to that trauma?
Something like that, yeah.
In your genes.
In your genes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, all the stresses are there. It's fascinating. And then you look at...
Well, it's fucking spooky too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because how do you get that out of the system?
Yeah.
And I still don't know why the sky's blue, but, this stuff is even more complex than that.
It's so multifaceted, multi-layered, and I think that's where you look at our social issues that are happening and that just having that understanding of where Māori have come from and their cultural positioning now. You understand the fury, you understand the frustration, and that's represented in lots of countries around the world. But for our people, as a Pākehā woman, it just makes you go, shit, take stock, recognise. And I know it's an overused word now, is that recognise your privilege, but you really do need to recognise your privilege. Like, it should be, you enter into your life now, into your communities, into your societies, going, what is my privilege? And recognise it,
So Bettina will be smiling at this point because we had this conversation back at the office this morning.
Oh, yeah.
And she said, look, we're not talking enough about Black Lives Matter and so forth, within collective intelligence, and we need to talk about that more. And I went, yeah, okay, where should we talk about that? So she'll be delighted in the podcast. Here we are in the afternoon. She was rattling my cage this morning going, we need to be talking about this more. So, Bettina, there we go. It's on the table.
You're welcome.
But it's the problem with privilege, Sian, I've got more privilege than you because I'm a fella. So I get I've come from even more privilege than you have, and but the problem with privilege is that when you've got it, you can't see it.
I know, absolutely,
and it's really inconvenient to.
And when it's pointed out to you, we get defensive about it. That's the other thing.
I don't.
Oh, bullshit. Bullshit. It's a really uncomfortable word, privilege. Oh, I know, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. But we're having to. We're having to incorporate it more and more into our teaching as well. That's the other thing that we've recognised is that we've got to start talking explicitly about it, not just recognise it, not just going, oh yeah, okay, I've come from this, and this is my skin colour, and this is what I do. We've got to start explicitly recognising it.
And I have so much respect for the Germans, the way they cope with their history, and they've got landmarks and so forth, and they don't pull the concentration camps down, and they've got them there, and they're not there as statues, but they're sitting there as a reminder of, this shit happened, and we need to not forget that and understand. And the interesting thing is that you don't have to feel guilty.
No, I know.
It's not, because I don't feel guilty about being white at all, and I don't. I just need to understand. I believe, I just need to understand the Māori perspective, appreciate that perspective, respect it, incorporate it, and not shy away from it.
Absolutely, yeah. I just find that when we talk about it, if it doesn't evoke some kind of empathy in you, then we've still got a long way to go, and that's the emotion it should evoke. We should feel safe enough to hear another person's story and have empathy for it, and if we're not there yet, if we're still getting defensiveness, if we're still getting guilt, if we're still getting anger or frustration, we've still got a lot of work to do. Yeah.
Sian, what else do you want to talk about today? Because Sian's had a list.
Oh, I didn't. I just made some notes this morning. I wasn't sure where this was going to go, to be honest.
Mate, it's a shambles, this interview.
Is it? Yeah. It's gone in no path. No, I mean, we've touched...
That's not true. It's not true. I really enjoyed this.
No, I have too. It's a great... It makes me reflect on just where Blue School has come, where it's come from, and also where it's at now, and also those drivers. Why are we still here, and what are we doing? And I think I'm being driven more. Blue School is Blue School, and it's found its space now, and it's a thriving school. But I feel my sense of calling to a higher purpose. I've always had that higher purpose calling of what are we doing for our children and in our communities. And so I said to my mum, I think when I was about 14, that one day I was going to be the CEO of Oranga Tamariki, because we've fostered children all our lives, and I became a caregiver about 5 years ago. And it was halfway through Blue School. It wasn't so much anything wanting to get out of Blue School. It was just more, I want to build up my knowledge around my families who are outside of Blue School, because I have a very monodemographic group of families at Blue School, and I'm not able to connect to the wider outsider communities unless I actively do it. And also, I've just got such a passion and such a calling to work with our children in state care. So hence my move to doing masters in applied social work, which will be down the line. We're talking just when the opportunity arises, but it's helping me in my role at Blue just really understand and teach our children what their privilege is, and what the world in which, the community in which they sit and live, and that understanding that we do lack diversity here in Greytown. So what are we doing for our children to make sure that they are not just, they leave us with an understanding of what diversity is, and inclusion is, and respect is, and what their privilege is, So.
Sian, I'm going to wrap up there.
Great.
And the reason, don't say great, the reason for that is it's just such a wonderful summary at the end, and I just go, I didn't know that was something you're working on now. So, Sian, thank you so much for your work with Blue School.
Pleasure.
And good luck with this next stage. I really look forward to seeing where this ends up with you going forward. And thanks for doing the work you do.
Thanks, Alf.
You've just been listening to an episode of Stuff That Matters Now, brought to you by Collective Intelligence. I hope you enjoyed listening to the fun stuff, the rugged stuff, and the complete stuff-ups that have helped this particular Collective Intelligence member evolve while making the world a better place. Do check out our Stuff That Matters Now podcast series on your favourite podcast provider, or visit our website www.collectiveintelligence.co.nz to get links to new episodes. Contact us if you want to learn more about how we can help you evolve yourself and others. Thanks for listening.